This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. Brought to you by Vigilant Impact. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping the vigilant, those men and women who stand watch, keeping our houses of worship and places of faith safe. We believe church safety and security must be a ministry first and have engaged, servant leaders who continually strive for excellence and teams of motivated volunteers that are always training. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, Dr. James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, churchsafetyguys.com, and on the original Church Security app. Download it today. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your ministry.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I am joined by my co-host, Mike, on the first inaugural broadcast of 2023.
What's up, stranger? I was going to say, thanks for introducing yourself. I almost forgot what your first name was. No, I'm
almost.
Well,
no,
you know, in touch, but
we were talking about that the other day because you said, and I realized it too, like in our Facebook Messenger, we always have like each other in the top like 2 or 3 messages. And I think at one point we descended, like I know you descended,
you
to
dropped off
like,
page 1.
Sick. Yeah, you went down. And I'm like, wait a second. And then I had to message you for something, and I'm like, where'd Mike go?
It's funny. No, you know what? It was one of those things. It hasn't happened, but as we prescribe in our ministry life cycle, there is a season of renewal. And so December for us really was that opportunity to take a break, refresh, recharge, renew, reinvent in some ways. I mean, we've kind of, it's not broke, don't fix it, so to speak, but really even just to have kind of brainstorm about the path forward, pray about it, and kind of receive that vision. As we also talk about, vision is one of the life cycle steps. So it was really good to kind of go through, I feel like that refresh period, that brainstorming and vision casting for the next year, and then come back into January. Not just everyone has that kind of, I guess I call it almost youthful energy going into the new year. Maybe it's just turning a new leaf, turning a new year, new chapter that you're writing. And so all of that, if we use that energy combined with the rest and kind of say, hey, how are we going to actually tackle 2023? Which still blows my mind because it feels like I recall the turn of 2000, like feels like a few years ago, but at the same point, it goes fast. So it was a good break. Sure. But I miss being able to talk to the folks and hear from the audience and talk about this topic.
For sure. It was, I mean, we were both very busy too with church stuff, and we're actively involved in, and I'd like to think that, you know, we're going to have a slow, quiet spring, and that's not going to happen because we're gearing up for sure. I've got some stuff going on the end of this month in Texas, and then we have our annual conference in O'Fallon, which is right outside of St. Louis. There's still tickets available for that. And you're welcome to go to churchsafetyconference.com and purchase tickets for that. And there's more information on our website. That is going to be a great day. We've had quite a few. I haven't heard the ticket sale numbers yet, but I know there's a lot of churches in Missouri that have picked up tickets for their team. So great day. We've got a great day of speakers and topics and selections. And Mike and I will be there. John Riley with General Response will be there. And then also we will have Dwayne Harris with Full Armor Church. So, and there's a few other folks, but again, more information on our website. So you're welcome to pick up tickets. It's a great price. The church out there that's hosting it has partnered with us, and we really appreciate that. And it includes, the tickets include lunch. So it's a great, it's going to be a great day of fellowship and just learning, and hopefully a blessing to you and your team if you come out. That gives us the opportunity to help you and just share best practices and that sort of thing. So
it's been a few years since we've been in the St. Louis area. We haven't done a conference there, so this will be the first conference in that area. So it'll be good to kind of, and it's earlier this year. I mean, I know we typically have done a little bit later in the year. Last year, Orlando was a bit later in the spring. So this moves it up a little bit earlier in the year. So if you haven't got those tickets, now's the time. Lock those down and hope to see you there.
Yep. And if you're part of the folks from the northern Midwest, immediately following St. Louis, we actually have a conference up in Green Bay, about, 5 miles from the Green Bay Packer Stadium. And I will be, after St. Louis, I'll be going up there and spending a couple days up there and speaking. And so that's a great conference as well. That's going to happen. I think it's Monday and Tuesday of, I want to say March 13th, but check it out on our website. There's a bunch of resources at churchsafetyguys.com. And then there's also the Church Security app. You're welcome to download. That's free. And there's resources available on there for you and your team as well. So, and as always, if you are so inclined, feel free to like and subscribe to, if you're watching this on YouTube or our main channels, you're welcome to click that like and subscribe button. That does help us out and helps us grow and alerts you to when we have content coming available. But if you're new, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And we typically try and do a live broadcast every Sunday night at about 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we cycle through topics and guests and content and all that fun stuff pertaining to church safety and security. So,
yeah. Figure we'd talk through a little bit of recapping 2022. It's been a little while since we've done an episode, but had some highlights wanted to cover for last year quickly, and then we'll bring in our guests for this evening.
For sure. So we always kind of analyze who listens to the broadcast and from where, and just kind of look at some of the impact, and I'm kind of reading through some of my notes, but last year for our broadcast, I think we had like the number one episode that we had was actually on firearms. Go figure. And firearm awareness, and then preparing for the holidays. That was a really big episode that we did. And it's kind of funny because sometimes the topics, when we come up with a topic, it's really based on what you guys ask us. So like if you message us or say, hey, can you guys talk about this, then we'll bring that topic in.
Yep.
But the planning or preparing for the holidays, I think we had Jared Teslov with us, and Jared is a good friend and does a lot to help us behind the scenes with the Church Safety Guys ministry out in Arizona. But you'll probably be seeing some more of him in the next couple of months as well with broadcasting. But as far as the reach, what's interesting is, again, we've seen growth, and we've seen some crazy things that God has done and God has blessed. But I would say our number one is reach for listeners is still the U.S. And then last year, that quickly escalated to Canada, and then also New Zealand and Australia. So it's
Thank you.
to me, yeah, absolutely. To me, I always find that interesting.
Yeah.
But the churches that hear us overseas, thanks for paying attention. Thanks for listening.
And feel free
We
to shoot
certainly
us a
appreciate it.
message. We're happy
Yeah,
to chat
absolutely.
sometime. I know we can work the time zones. A lot of the folks that do reach out tend to be more stateside, but happy to chat. I know my day job, I'm talking with folks all over around the clock. So, in different parts of the world. So happy to do so. Happy to learn more about the things that are affecting your church and your area, so that we can better share and pass on those stories to others who can benefit from it as well.
For sure. And I think the other interesting thing too that we've kind of come across, and then we can move on. But with the broadcast, I do a lot of research with it, because I think it also tells us who in the community, who in churches are involved with church safety, and who is really well, I'll back up. The interesting component is seeing the age piece of it. And the reason is because we're seeing a pretty significant shift in folks listening based on age. And I think we're seeing that significant shift also kind of goes over to the community itself. But,
Right.
93% of our listeners are male, 7% female. That's probably, that's the highest it's ever been. And that's grown at least 4% in the last year. So, when I look at those numbers, that tells me that more women are serving in this arena, which is great. That's fantastic. And, moving forward, we always look at that and we say, okay, how can we support women in the ministry as well, and have topics that pertain to them, and bless them, and that sort of thing. The other interesting thing is we saw a pretty significant jump with the age between 35 and 44, which was at 48%. So 48% of our listeners actually went below Mike and my age, which is a first. But again, it's interesting. I'm not going to go on and on about numbers for the rest of the night.
Yep.
But at the same time, it tells me that, a younger generation is actively seeking, information on church safety and security. And we're seeing those shifts pretty significantly. In the last year, we've seen shifts in folks. So,
And that's playing out in the phone calls and the emails as well. I think we're seeing folks that are craving not just content, but really reaching out and want kind of coaching and other sorts of assistance that's specific and personalized to them. So that's something we've seen a growth in, as well as that demographic age shifts. So that is something that, hey, you have an issue or a challenge, or you're starting a team, or you're trying to reboot a team, feel free and reach out. We do have coaching available.
Absolutely. And then the other thing I did want to mention real quick was the books and the resources. In October, the end of October, beginning of November, we came out with our book on the 4 pillars. And what was amazing about that, it's behind Mike. I've got a couple sitting next to me behind, so you can kind of take a look there. But anyhow, what's crazy about it is that it went from, a brand new release to a number 1 bestseller on Amazon to, looking at it in 1 month's time, we actually sold almost more copies of that than any other book in that period. And so that was pretty amazing. I think our all-time number 1 seller was the first book we came out with, which was War Ready as a devotional. And then after that, it went to the case for church safety and security. And, again, we're seeing it's just amazing how God blessed last year, because we're seeing copies of that now. The case for church safety and security, we've sold copies in Germany, India, and then also Canada as well. And so to me, I'm just humbled by that. I never anticipated it. I put that book together because I felt like God wanted me to. And, and then here we are a couple of years later, and, we have folks around the world that are saying, hey, we love that, and we appreciate, what you're doing. So
I still go back and say, you know what? If you had asked me a year before, if you ever saw me writing one book, co-authoring one book, let alone I think we're up to 5 now with you. So I mean, God has done some amazing things, and we feel blessed and appreciate the folks following us and willing to purchase the books and really support the ministry. This is a labor of love. This is not a full-time job for any of us. This is really something that we do to give back and kind of help folks across the country, across the globe, as James said, to really drive the value and excellence in this ministry forward. So happy to help in any way we can. But let's, I think we can jump forward and introduce our guests.
Yeah, I will say, definitely, I will say real quick, we've got some new stuff that just came out. Like, we have a new sequel to War Ready 2, that's available now. And then Mike and I, hopefully in the spring, our intent is to finish up the Ministry Life Cycle series and leadership series. So we're definitely working on that, and not slowing down, except maybe a little bit for the conferences.
Well, we paused, and 4 Pillars was not on the roadmap.
No.
And all of a sudden, more divine inspiration. And coming out of Dallas, Texas, we did a conference down there and had numerous attendees kind of, hey, we want to hear what you just talked about. And so our conference topic became a book. And then it exploded. So it totally didn't expect that. So now we got to go back to, we return to your previously scheduled programming,
right?
Writing those books.
So anyhow, we wanted to do, every once in a while we come across other ministries, obviously, that are working hard and supporting folks. And I happen to come across a ministry that we wanted to share with you guys called Heroic Deeds, and their website is Heroic Deeds on Google. If you look it up or whatnot, we'll have the website on the bottom in a little bit here, heroicdeeds.org. And so what they're doing, I really liked it. There's always a crossover. I feel like there's always a crossover between first responders and also church safety, because a lot of folks that are first responders serve in that capacity in their church. And we see that a lot, where that's their ministry to the church as well as their full-time job. So
we encourage that outreach to further
absolutely
connect those folks as well. I feel like, and by no means, I know sometimes people hear the two in the same sentence and try to think that we're doing some sort of equating, but that's not what we're saying. We're saying that we do understand that the idea, a person who is willing to step forward and be a protector in any capacity, whether that be in our armed services, whether that be in law enforcement, or whether that be in any other capacity of protection, it takes a certain caliber. When you do it from a ministry mindset, that unifies and brings people together even further. So we like to try to really focus on what we call the vigilant and how we can have a positive impact on them.
For sure. So I'm going to bring in Chad and Toby with Heroic Deeds, and we'll get started with them. So, hey guys, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey guys, appreciate the invitation tonight.
Absolutely.
Yes. Not a problem at all. So I stumbled across your ministry. You guys are situated in Ohio. So I was a little embarrassed that I was like, hey, you're in my backyard. But if you would, for our folks, just kind of go through what you do and how that kind of brought you into Heroic Deeds.
Sure. Yeah. I'll do a quick intro, then I'll kick it over to Toby because he really had the vision here to get Heroic Deeds not only created but like off the ground. So yeah, I'm Chad DePew. So I'm in Ohio. Toby's in California. So we like to say we have a ministry across the country, but we're really operating out of the Dayton, Ohio area here right now. But yeah, so I'm a police chief here in the Dayton, Ohio area, and this year will be my 22nd year in law enforcement. So just a career, I wouldn't do it any other way. I've been very blessed by it. Career just full of ups and downs, but amazing stories and amazing people in the process. But I'll kick it over to Toby, introduce himself, and talk about the creation of Heroic Deeds.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen, for inviting us. The work that you guys do is super valuable for the churches and for the kingdom. Unfortunately, there's a huge need for church safety that probably 20, 30 years ago, we would have never thought that we would need such a thing. But for what you guys do and all the sheepdogs out there that help protect churches, thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Just going back just a little bit, I have been a first responder. I've been a deputy sheriff out here in California, but I had a different route that I initially took. My brother was going off into the law enforcement academy and I was going to Bible college. So I was a senior pastor, full-time senior pastor for many years, in the ministry full-time for about 15 years. And then God started to really work on my heart about being a first responder. I have to give a shout out to our dad. We're brothers, by the way. Okay, we have the same last name. If you didn't figure that out yet, there's one of us more handsome than the other one. So I'll let you figure out.
I think there's like a vote. You guys have like a live tally on that, I'm sure. Yeah. We'll figure that out later.
I don't want Chad's feelings to be hurt, so let's not do that. But anyhow. So, our dad was a director of a correctional facility and probation officer. So it's always been in our blood. But God really started to stir in me to become a first responder. So in my 30s, I threw myself into the law enforcement academy out here in California. And here in California, we still have a stress academy. So there's guys with drill sergeant hats in your face, calling you everything but a child of God. And trying to get you to quit and to stress you out. So here am I in my 30s competing with 21-year-olds. And I really didn't understand, what I'd gotten into or what I did. I was hired as a deputy sheriff in San Luis Obispo County. And I started just like any new boot or new guy out there. My second day on training, and, I was still working at a church. So even when I worked, like, for example, a graveyard shift, I would work a graveyard shift, sleep, take a nap for an hour, and then like preach in the morning. I did that for a while.
Oh, wow.
But my second day on training, day number 2, this is going through the academy, fresh out of the church. About 10 yards in front of me, there was a call for service. And I watched a guy pull out a handgun very quickly and shoot himself in the head right in front of us. So it was just like, what have I gotten? My first call after I got off was my brother, like, what in the heck did I just get involved in?
Sure.
I didn't expect all this stuff going on. So that was in 2013. And, I spent the next so many years being a patrol deputy here in California and starting to experience the trauma and the stress that everybody who works in the field starts to experience. Little did I know, I kind of stumbled and bumbled into things that God would really kind of point me into, things that weren't happening or things other people in the department really didn't have an interest in. So I was privileged to be able to start our chaplain program for the county, get it fired up. I was able to start our peer support program. for the county and help other agencies do the same things. And I also help get fired up in our area. Our crisis intervention training, which ended up every law enforcement officer in the county pretty much was required to come spend a week in a program that I was blessed to help put on. So I ended up becoming, and this is kind of unheard of, because I was a slick sleeve. My brother has a bunch of stars and bars and stripes, and like I have nothing. So he represents admin. So, and I represent all the grunts out there, the deputies for life. But what was weird, I was getting to do things, that it turns out if you present a reasonable plan, there's a lot of admin that want to say yes to things. So I was able to create 4 or 5 different programs and write policy on.
Sure.
And by the end of it, I was it was crazy because I was working full time doing this stuff. So in a sense, I was like, I had a badge and a gun. I couldn't become a chaplain because of policy, but I was like pastoring this group of first responders.
Sure.
So they had to spend a week with me through training. And during that week, we talked a lot about peer support. And I was having grown, hardened veterans like stay after class and want prayer and want to be, we didn't mention it. We talked about spirituality in our training. And an idea started to percolate that, why don't we create a venue where it's like, okay, we're not going to wait till after class, but we can come together as first responders and say, hey, we're going to get together and pray for each other and talk about spiritual things, kind of get out of the government setting because it's already happening. At that same time in my life, I had some very important pillars that we all build our life on. One is, my marriage and my kids. One was really my ministry. One was my job, being a deputy sheriff, and other one was really my relationship with God. And through just, life taking a toll and being a first responder and pushing for all these things through all these years, things really started to kind of come apart and unravel in my life. There wasn't any adultery or there wasn't any big sin within my marriage with my wife and I, but we were at a really bad place and we ended up separating. A ministry that I had been a part of, things just kind of went sideways with that. It was put a bad taste in my mouth. So, I was struggling with not only marriage, but ministry was, being taken away. But I still really had, these things that I love to do for the sheriff's office as far as my job. And then on duty, I was involved in an incident and got hurt and got injured on a few different body parts. And now I'm immediately out of that. So here I am, separated from my wife, trauma from the job, the ministry is taken away, and now I'm basically sitting at home thinking, what in the heck is going on? And God again started dealing with my heart and the concepts that I was starting to use in my own life to kind of come out of that pit and rebuild my life. God started to put the idea of heroic deeds in my heart. I was in a grungy gym, working out, like dingy, dirty, and God just started to place like heroic deeds in my heart and what that meant. I had a pastor friend that I, entrusted, and he was mentoring me through this time. And I said, look, like I got a lot of stuff going on right now, but tell me if this is crazy, but I have this idea to have this conference. There's a lot in the law enforcement world. Peer support's very big right now, but nobody's hitting the spiritual component of it. And I kind of want to do this. And I was hoping that he would say, you know what, you're right. You're a big time loser right now. You shouldn't pursue this. But he didn't. So it's kind of one of those times, it's like Jonah in the belly of the whale saying, really, God, right now, you want me to talk about this stuff? So there's things that I never did in my life after about 1.5 years of me going through great Christian lady, a licensed therapist walking me through things for a year and a half. And God restoring my marriage. Thank God we were back together and more happy than ever. But
God.
I had this ideal of heroic deeds, and I talked to Chad, my brother. I said, "This is what I'm thinking, and this is what we're planning to do, a conference out in California. Do you think you guys might be interested in it?" And Chad kind of took the idea and ran with it. And, I would zoom in, and at times I would visit with chiefs that he had gotten together, and it just started to take off. At the same time, here in California, I got involved in that incident where I was injured. So I had to really step back. And Chad really took off and just ran with it. So I really have to give him credit for everything kind of since then. But that was the dark place that God really started to birth in our hearts. And we have 3 tenets in Heroic Deeds, is that we want first responders to get them as healthy as they can be, physically, mentally, emotionally, and we believe most importantly, spiritually. And that's the niche that we're trying to hone in on. And looking back, why God called me, or why I feel God called me, to put myself through an academy and put myself through all that hell, is I really feel like that he was calling me to be a missionary. And to be a missionary, you have to get into the tribe, learn the language, learn the culture, and to become one of these people. And then you can start to minister to them. And looking back, that's kind of what happened.
For sure.
Wow.
And to me, that's an amazing story. But, when I was in, and I don't share this too often because it was a long time ago, but when I was in high school, I started with the fire department and my career with the fire service for the length of time that I was with them. And, there were a few things that happened. I was in a situation where I kind of ignored, and I was intentionally ignoring what I knew God wanted me to do with my life. And God used a few situations to really get my attention. And one of those situations was an unbelievable amount of trauma with a motor vehicle accident. And it was really crazy, but it was at that point, that he really reached down and grabbed my heart and said, "Okay, you know what? You're ignoring me, but I just put this in front of you, and now this is what I want you to do." And and you're going to listen to me. And I was like, at that point in time, yeah, I was like, okay, God, you know what? You got my attention, because I realized that I can't do this and handle this type of situation. This was a single car motor vehicle accident with 5 individuals, and alcohol had been involved, and we had two life flights take 2 of the 5. One was killed instantly. 2 were transported by helicopter, and we were the first ambulance on the scene. And I was actually the first EMT on the scene after 45 minutes, because the other 2 ambulances responding got lost. And I actually knew right where it was. And so I was driving our rig, and we got there, so, I mean, you guys, you can imagine it was just utter chaos. And really that was the point in time where God was like, okay, now I've put you in this situation with chaos, right? And what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to handle this? And, the first thing I remember, standing on the side of the road and looking up, just stopping, like, everything is slow motion. And I just stopped, and I looked up in the sky, and all I could see was stars. And I remember just saying, okay, God, I don't know how to deal with this, but, help me, and I'll do whatever. I chuckle about it now. I certainly wasn't then, but I was like, hey, I will do whatever you want from me. And honestly, I mean, that situation really changed my life, because it was at that point where I was like, okay, I know exactly what God wants me to do, and I know why he wants me to do it. And, I ended up going to a Bible college, and that had been something I was putting off, pushing away, being involved with my church and that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden it actually, and to your situation, Toby, it kind of put me in a place where now all of a sudden, because I made that a priority, the folks that were around me, and that was back in the 90s. I mean, we didn't have anything for PTSD or anything like that, really, for, unless it was a large scale situation. I mean, back then it was like, suck it up, get back to work, do your thing. If you're having issues with this, you're just not being man enough. You need to man up. And what was amazing to me was, at that point in time, I just started praying with people and kind of acting that role. After a situation, I would go up to them and say, "Hey, are you okay? Do you want to talk about this?" And really, I mean, I had no official training other than, being involved with my church. And, I go back and I equate a lot of that to my dad, because my dad, he's an engineer. He was never involved in public safety or anything like that. But every time I would respond to a call and come home, he would, have a cup of coffee on the kitchen table. He'd be sitting there and he'd be like, "Okay, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to tell me what's going on?" And I'll never forget that, because there were times where I was like, "Sure, thanks for the coffee, let's talk," and just having that, that counsel and that reassurance. I mean, I think that kind of helped me get through a lot of what otherwise I don't know. I don't know where I'd be today. I mean, obviously there are still things that I remember, like, yesterday. Maybe that's, maybe I've had issues with that, maybe not. But at the same time, for public safety and in that dynamic, I feel like the church needs to be more involved in understanding that. And it's hard to understand it and hard to be involved and hard to support the community when you don't always understand that, if that makes sense, because it is a unique occupation and that sort of thing. But Mike, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. I mean, what an amazing story, Toby. And I want to really kind of start. I'd say, Chad, thank you for your 22 years. I volunteer with my local police department, not a sworn officer, but I'm around the guys and gals all the time. I actually go out on patrol at least one shift per month myself, and assisting the PD. So certainly appreciate that level of work, and certainly taking on the role of chief is an added layer of pressure and stress and challenges and duties. So totally respect that. Toby, really, what a journey. I mean, just hearing that is great. And I knew certainly James' story, and I hear a lot of testimony from a lot of different folks, and a lot of us bring these scars to the table, and while we're in them, going through those situations, we don't know why. And we sit there and everyone wants to say, God is good. But yet we have those questions. And if we're being honest, we do ask those questions. But then you look back years later and you realize God stacked up almost like planes landing on an aircraft carrier, the level of detail and things that needed to happen, whether that's connections, whether that's learning. And I always use the phrase winning and learning. There's no loss. You may be winning at times, but you may be learning at times to set up for the next win. And with God, we have that better chance of winning on a more frequently basis. So praise God on your marriage. Praise God on the ability to really kind of say,
Sure.
cut the teeth and learn and realize, hey, the stressors that hit you and the needs that hit others as well. I feel like that it's one of those areas that we felt that same pressure come into the world of church safety and security, and felt that, these folks that are have served for 15, 20 years and they're in their true retirement ages, and they're now stepping away. Well, many of them have this identity in what they did for so many years, whether that's serving in a police department, serving in the military, whether that's serving in a church. And stepping away from that is a loss of that identity to many of these folks. And there, it puts a level of pressure that no one prepared for. And many aren't even prepared for in the roles they're in today. So I the only way I can look at getting around that is exactly what you talked about, is it's the God component. It's the spiritual nature. There's so many things that people can do to be healthy physically. There's the right things that need to be done to be right mentally. And that's taken more of a forefront in the last couple of years through COVID and things like that, and how, you know, mental health is physical health, and it's important and how critical it is. But also looking at empathy and compassion, and how you really kind of say, you know what, the emotional side of things, it matters, and everything we do on a daily basis can take a toll. And that's why we said in the beginning of the show, God incidents of, we took December off to recharge. We recognized that we had been going straight doing this, so sometimes you need that recharge. But I think what's amazing is the common element there in one of your tenets is that the ministry first is what for us is church security is all about. Plenty of folks out there that, you know what, they want to break a door down, they want to clear a room, they want to have that mindset, whether it because they're an officer or we're an officer. But it's beyond that. It's how can you pray with somebody just as easily as you potentially have to disarm somebody or de-escalate somebody? What does that look like? And that spiritual component really matters. So really great listening to some of the story. I'd love you to, either one of you guys, to jump in and share more about, okay, what is the mission, Heroic Deeds? We heard the tenets. Give us a little more there.
Chad, if you want to talk about you know, really what heroic deeds mean, and, you know, heroic deeds done dirt cheap.
Yeah. So when Toby, he called me about a year and a half ago now, it was spring of 2021 with this idea of, hey, like the world is nuts right now. We've had a year of COVID. We've had protest, rioting, defund the police movements. We've seen record low turnout for police, fire jobs, really in your first responder jobs. So we have a crisis in the public safety profession of just a lack of employees. There's been just high rates of turnover with little people to backfill those positions, which means officers, the firefighters, the dispatchers that are working are like having to work crazy hours of overtime. They're missing more birthdays, more holidays than ever before. And just been kicked in the gut in general, again, with everything happening in our society. So like he calls me, he's like, hey, what do we do about that? I'm like, I don't know, right? That's like, I wish we could answer that question. You know, we don't, that's a really tough challenge because there's so many variables in that. But what we knew to be true and what had to be at the epicenter of that is, okay, let's start with God. How can we minister to this group of first responders, which, you know, can be kind of a tough crowd to relate to, especially when you're talking about things of faith or spirituality. So, you know, when Toby called me, he kind of started the fire, had an ember going. I'm like, hey, let's dump a bucket of gas on this and just run with it, okay? That's kind of what we did. You know, when he called me, you know, his story is incredible. And when he called me, I was at a point in my career where I really felt a strong conviction because, you know, even then I'd been in it for over 20 years, been with a couple of different agencies at this point. You know, I think I've maybe done an okay job. You know, my coworkers knew that I was a Christian. You know, I tried to be a servant, lead with a servant's heart like Jesus did, even in a role as a chief. But you know, really just felt convicted that, you know, have I done enough in these 20 plus years God has given me to really minister to these amazing men and women that I'm just working with every day. And, you know, I'll tell you, really the first 16, 17 years of my career, I really compartmentalized what I think was my personal life and my work life, but that also included my spiritual life. You know, I wasn't ashamed of my faith, but I let myself be more of a leader in my role as police chief. And I think just somebody who's like, hey, like, I'm just a Christian dude, it's big and a cool opportunity. How can I use this as a platform for you? So just really starting to feel convicted about that because, you know, I'm over 20 years in, but in law enforcement, 25 career is pretty normal in Ohio anyway. 30s generally about the average retirement for most people. So it's like, you know, am I winding down my career, and have I done enough to really serve these people that I'm around, these people that, I've known just for decades at this point, at least in my area, Dayton, Ohio. And I've been blessed with so many other opportunities. I know cops all across this country, and like, have I done enough? So I really just felt convicted, personally, and like, well, gosh, what can I do? And the last few years, I really tried to make a better effort of, where I'm at now, when we have meetings with our police staff, opening in prayer, do biblical devotionals, kind of really be unashamed about those things. But it's like, what else can we do? So the timing was right when he called me to try to take what he and I have been given, these roles as police officers, and really just let God take over, right? Do what you want to do at this point, because those things we do in our career, and I got wrapped up in that for years of, promotions and titles and just incredible things you get to do, certifications, awards, all those awards and plaques, they're sitting in a tote in my garage right now, right? Where I am now, I haven't even really like fully decorated my office because those things just aren't as important. I'm very blessed by all those things, but it's like, man, what can we do for God where we are now? So when he first called me with that concept, it's like, hey, we don't know what we're going to do. We're going to do something, right? So he really came up with the concept, the Responders in Faith conference out there in California originally. But I really love the concept that he came up of heroic deeds done dirt cheap. And the heroic deeds is obviously what it is. We have so many first responders, cops, firefighters, corrections officers, dispatchers, performing these acts of heroism day in and day out. James, the story that you told, accidents like that are happening all over this country today. And we just have so many first responders seeing these horrible things, doing these heroic acts, and they're doing them for no extra pay, doing them for no recognition. Sometimes they're getting more flack than pats on the back for these acts of heroism that they're doing, especially if they turn on the media. They turn on the news, they'll go to an accident like you referred to and maybe save somebody's life, but turn on the news and see somebody that like hate cops and firefighters getting put on the spotlight. So that just really just over time, these cops and firefighters, all of our first responders are just getting these packages of trauma and they're just burying them deeper and deeper. So they're doing these heroic deeds done dirt cheap. Again, these are dirty deeds. These are gnarly acts involving life and death, blood, and just all these horrible things that just hard for anybody to see, let alone deal with. And they're just having to do those things and just go to the next call. I grown up in my career, we've certainly gotten a lot better over the last 5 to 10 years on peer support, on offering counseling to our first responders. But, when I started my career in 2001, it was very much like just suck it up and move on. Yeah, you saw a nasty train accident where somebody was dismembered. Hey, just go to the next call, get over it. Most of the times, not even, hey, are you guys okay? It's just, what's next, right? You just didn't talk about those things. And, I consider myself blessed in my career. Thankfully, I just always put my faith in God, where I don't understand why these things happen. But as the pastor of my church here likes to say, and he's actually one of our board members, that God is too wise to make a mistake and too loving to be unkind. And I've just always believed that. Some things I can't answer. Some things we just got to trust God with. So that's the inspiration behind our name of heroic deeds done dirt cheap. These first responders performing these acts of heroism for no recognition, no extra money or no glory or fame. They're just dirty deeds, and they're doing it really with a servant's attitude. And whether they realize it or not, they're serving God in the process.
When I came up with this name and tagline, I may or may not have been listening to AC/DC. So, well, three qualifications for a good logo is, in my opinion, on our logo, it's American flag, a Spartan helmet, and an AC rock and roll reference. So
there you go. That's awesome. So from an organizational standpoint, and I mean, obviously you've been in public safety for a long time. What are some things? A lot of times there's always an us and them mentality with public safety. I mean, there's an us and them with the fire department and police department. I mean, there's an us and them between, a lot of times, I mean, Mike and I have seen it where it's like, okay, well, we're going to call them to do their thing at the church, and when we have an issue and all of that sort of thing. But what are some things that you guys think the church could be better at with interacting in the community and being supportive? Because we have a lot of folks that do listen, that do reach out, that serve in the safety or security ministry. And a lot of times, like I know our church, we intentionally reached out to local first responders. Like we would invite the fire department over for activities, or the police department. What are some things that you guys think that the church maybe can do better, or to build that unity and bridge between public servants and the church?
Well, I think one of the things, we had our first conference this past March, and we're having our second one coming up in March again in Ohio. One of the things real easy is there's some really cool churches that have partnered with us to make this happen. We had probably a couple hundred registered, but through that weekend, we probably had about 500 people come through the doors with 70 volunteers. So for us, and specifically this nonprofit, is the support of the church coming together and doing this. We've been very blessed with one of our board members, Jeff Neighbor. He started the law enforcement ministry for Billy Graham. So he's the guy, day number one, started it, and he's on our board, and he helps, lead and guide and mentor us in these things. So, partner with, not only support what you guys are doing. There are so many, getting into this, there are so many nonprofits that are trying to do really cool things for first responders. Mm-hmm. And Chad and I have always looked at it as like, it is not competition, that we have a nonprofit now, because I have never seen a nonprofit that is doing what we're trying to do. And I'm looking at these other nonprofits, and we're saying, we will never do that. But it's a really cool thing. So in your local community, there is probably some nonprofits that are doing some things for first responders that could use your support. We learned of a lady recently down in Cincinnati. I forget the name of the nonprofit, but I'm like, that's a really cool idea. We're not doing that. We'll never do that. But even as a nonprofit, we're thinking about how we can raise money for other nonprofits to do what they do. Out of Santa Barbara County, there's a nonprofit, that the 911 at Ease, that it's on one of our shirts that we produce, that we've tried to help them. They pay 100% for first responders to go to licensed therapy, not connected with their agency. So there's other nonprofits out there that are doing cool stuff. But in one of my positions at the sheriff's office, and I won't get into detail, and even in one area I worked, but in another area I was a bailiff. And it was amazing to me that the court system, the government system in general, social service system in general, they only have so many answers. And it's a very complex world out there with complex problems. And when a church would come up with a reasonable solution, I've seen judges contemplate sending people instead of to jail, to a Christian ministry, to allow them to get help. So I don't think it's a matter of what the church could do. And I'll say this is to my shame, and I'll admit this, but I've done more ministry by carrying a badge and a gun and being a first responder than I probably did in my last, 2 years of working at a church full time. Just because getting out of the building, because at the end of the day, we believe that we still have the greatest hope that the world needs, and that's a relationship with Jesus Christ. So to provide realistic opportunities that helps this world along is a great place for the church to shine.
Absolutely.
And James, I'll jump in real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Based on your last question, I I've been in that position before, being a police chief in a community with a lot of local churches and having churches reach out to us of asking for support with their church security team. So some of the best advice I can give is obviously just that: be partners with your local first responder agencies, the police department, fire department, EMS, etc. Be partners with them. Invite them to your organization to see your operation, because as you alluded to earlier, if something happens, that's who you'll be working with, right? I suggest churches to legitimize themselves before they even take that step. I've been invited to churches who have like, hey, we have nothing right now. Help us get started, which is fine, to churches who have like a pretty legitimate program in place already, but be on that path towards legitimization. And be unapologetic to your church for it of, hey, we are going to take safety seriously. There may be times where that's inconvenient, but that's okay. We're here to keep everyone, our congregation safe, to keep our children safe where we're here. So really partner with those local first responder agencies, legitimize yourselves through policy, procedure, training, all those things that a formal security team should be doing at a church entity.
For sure.
Absolutely.
We actually, it was interesting. We had one of the local townships reach out to us. They were doing the, my brain just went out the window. First night. They were doing a first night thing where, they have cruisers lined up and touch a truck and that sort of thing.
National Night Out, I think.
National Night Out. Sorry. Thank you. And, so anyhow, they reached out to us and said, hey, do you guys have some people? We need some extra hands to just kind of supervise the crowd and that sort of thing. And what was crazy was we showed up, our church showed up. We probably had about 20 or 30 volunteers. And that just coming to their event was such a boost in morale between us, like between the police department and our church, that it's crazy, because now every time I pull into the church parking lot, there's a cruiser sitting there. And, this is something like we had years ago. I guess a previous police chief was like, no, that's the city of Columbus. We're not doing anything. And literally, like, Mike's heard me talk about this before, like the town line is like right in front of our church, and they wouldn't do anything because they'd be like, no, that's the city of Columbus. We can't do that. Now, because we stepped out and tried to help them and support them, now every time I go to the church, which is quite often, there's a cruiser sitting there and they're doing paperwork or they're eating dinner, and that's fine. Like, we offer them a cup of coffee or let them use the restroom and simple things like that. But because of that interaction, and not only that, but it also gave us the opportunity to witness to them and to share God's love, because several of the officers came to us later and they were like, hey, what time does your church meet? Like, is it okay if we come to your church? And we're like, absolutely. Like, we have no problem with that. Like, we want to see you there. So, and they already know people because they've met us right at this event and we spent the evening with them. So, I don't think it's as challenging as a lot of times people think, is all I'm saying. And I appreciate your guys' perspective on it as well. So
I think so many underestimate the power that a clean, safe bathroom can represent to patrol officers. And the middle of,
sure.
I mean, there are so many spots, especially certain beats and things like that, where, you're alone, you got no backup, and maybe you don't want to roll into that gas station. Certainly not on a call. So beyond that, I think that's a ministry, that's outreach right there. And I think outreach is one of the big pieces, but understand that, reach out, have the conversation before it's an emergency. Do it as the result of something that you're proactively trying to reach out to them, versus having a conversation with a detective after vandalism or a break-in occurred. Build those relationships so that when those bad things do happen, because you're going to have something happen, the difference just is you want to already have those relationships in place. And I've said that before, but it really is important. and it's all departments. I know we talk about it from a police department perspective, but it's fire. It's knowing the EMS folks as well, especially if you're ever going to be caught in a mass casualty incident. You're going to have everybody, and it's not going to just be your local community. You're going to have state, you're going to have sheriffs, you're going to have local PD, you're going to have fire, you're going to have EMS, emergency services. Everybody's going to be showing up for something like that. So build the connections now.
And just be supportive in general. That can just be making those connections, like you say, or inviting the local public safety when there's like a church gathering or get together, or encouraging church members to take a plate of food to the police department or fire department. Those acts of kindness really go a long way. It doesn't have to be anything large or grandiose. Just those small acts really are meaningful to our first responders.
It doesn't always have to be pizza either.
No, donuts and coffee is fine, though. I mean, we're not super picky.
If you're going to bring food, though, make sure it's sealed in its individual wrappers.
Yeah,
and not baked.
I was going to say, a lot of times I know our folks, because we're on the edge of Columbus, our precinct is very particular, as they should be, for that, and so a lot of times they prefer like Subway or somewhere where it's professionally made in a professional kitchen, or pizza and delivered.
Yep, 100%.
So yeah, definitely check out what their requirements are before investing a lot of time into that, and then finding out that maybe they can't take that gift card, or they can't take food made out of a kitchen, a private kitchen.
So wrapping up, so you guys talked about a conference coming up in March. I know we have our conference in March coming up as well. When are the dates for yours?
So ours is March 3rd and 4th, and it's right here in Miamisburg, Ohio.
All right.
And awesome. The theme of our faith, if we have a quick second, I'll let Toby hit on the theme, but with our conference, we talk about mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. We have some amazing speakers coming in. A guy named Jason Sautel, he wrote a book, and a former firefighter called The Rescuer, incredible book. A guy named Jeremy Stallnecker, who's one of the co-founders of the Mighty Oaks Warriors program. But, big part of what we try to do is we pride ourselves on maintaining culture of first responders, right? We understand how cops and firefighters act. We kind of know how they operate, what they think's cool, not cool, et cetera. We try to be relevant. So it's really tough when we talk about things that are faith-based to operate in that space, because first responders are super paranoid. They are super skeptical. So we have to say, hey, like, we're just one of you, but we're going to talk about God, and it's okay, right? We try to make cool merchandise that the cops and firefighters will actually wear, nothing corny or anything like that. But so we have close to 240 people already registered. We're still about 8 weeks out. So we're really praying and believing we'll reach 400 responders this year. But if we have a quick second, I'd like Toby to talk about our theme of I Will Respond.
Yeah. Well, it's we just feel like, as we prayed about it and thought about it, the verse Isaiah 6:8, came to our hearts. Then I heard the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. And we just felt like there's a crisis of cowardness in our society. And we want to say, a theme of our conference this year is I will respond. And what that means to us, I will respond to the immediate action or urgent need for assistance or relief that God has called me to or laid before me. And that could be on the job, but it also means I will respond to the event or series of events that represents a critical threat to the health, safety, security, or well-being of my relationship with God. I'll respond to my relationship with God. I will respond to my family. I will respond to my physical health. I will respond to my mental and emotional health, and I will respond to my job, mission, and purpose. So we are first responders. So we want to respond to those events that are a critical threat to the health, safety, and security of not just on the job. Mm-hmm. Because there is a sense of on the job when that call comes out, when literally I have heard a call on the radio and I thought, well, this may be it today. I may die today. And then having the resolve, like, well, God, it's time to get paid. This is what I get paid for. I'm going to be a responder to this. And we do that on the job, but God is also asking us to respond to him, our family, and our marriage. And I'm one who neglected those things. And I've had to be respondent to my wife and family and marriage, because a lot of first responders end up in a dark room, suicidal and drinking and disconnected with their families. And we want to draw them out. And also our physical health, our mental and emotional health, to say, I'm going to respond. If I need to go to therapy, I will. If I need to get on a medication, I will. I want to talk to these things. And lastly, not just our job, but our mission and our purpose that God has called us to. So we will respond.
Really good.
For sure. I've got a slide I'm going to, Chad actually shared, so I'll pull it up here real quick. So March 3rd and 4th, Southbrook Church, Miamisburg. And then all the slide shows, for those of you that don't have video, you can visit heroicdeeds.org. And registration is free for all active and former first responders. And if you know of someone that you think would be blessed by attending, please pass along the information or the website. We had Jason Sautel on last fall because I read the book, The Rescuer, and I don't read a whole lot anymore. And I picked that book up and I was done in 24 hours. Like, I couldn't put it down. And so I emailed him and I'm like, hey man, I really like what you said. And he emailed me like the next day and he's like, yeah, I'd love to come on and talk to you guys. So like I said, I may try and make it just to meet him, because I think that would be pretty cool to actually get to meet him in person, because he's a very dynamic guy and touches a lot of people. God has used him in some crazy ways since he got out of the fire service for sharing the gospel, and it's encouraging. For sure.
Yeah, I told him I really had to humble myself to read that book. I'm like, bro, I'm a cop. I can't be caught reading this firefighter book, right? But it was really good. Like you said, like just engaging, just awesome book, awesome heart, great guy. So yeah, we're excited to have him on board.
Yeah,
for sure.
Toby, I really love the kind of what you talked through there, and I know we're already out of time, but there's just so much that's been good there, and that being responsiveness to those other signals. We got check engine lights in our car and people don't go change their oil. You know what? There's all of those different things. It's being receptive of what's going on in our life. And you know what? God puts those warning signs out there for a reason. We just often don't heed them. And so I think the idea that you're responding to each of those to actually be, I think it ties in with my word for the year, which is being intentional. Is that the idea is that you got to be more intentional about each and everything that you do, because when you're in it, that's it, versus move on to the next thing. Yes, we're busy. Yes, things can be chaotic, but you got to go all in on that one thing and be intentional in the moment.
For sure. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. And as always, we appreciate, love what you're doing, and appreciate your service in the community. And, if there's ever anything that we can help you with, please feel free to reach out as well.
Hey, you guys are rock stars. Appreciate the work you're doing too. You're filling a big need, a huge space. You guys are killing it. Good job. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks. I think, I don't know. I don't feel like a rock star. I mean, you just kind of do one day at a time. Right.
Yep.
But
that's right.
Exactly.
But anyhow,
gentlemen, thank you. God bless.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this broadcast. So again, just so you know, we have a conference March, 13th?
Yep.
Okay. I have to look at my calendar.
I had to think a second. I was going to pull it up.
March 13th in O'Fallon, Missouri. And you can visit churchsafetyconference.com for tickets and more information on that. Looking forward to that. And then we also have another conference up in Green Bay shortly after that. and definitely love to meet you. If you're in those areas, please feel free to reach out, and we're really looking forward to it. And again, if you visit Heroic Deeds, appreciative of their time in ministry, you can visit their website at heroicdeeds.org and register and get more information about their conference in Ohio that's coming up actually the beginning of March, right before ours. So, but am I forgetting anything? Did you want to add anything before we close out?
No, I think it's good. It's great to be back. It's like riding a bike. We just get back into the swing of things here, and what a way to kick off the year. Really appreciate the heart and the mission that these guys brought tonight, and really
For sure.
exuded from that perspective. It just really good, and I hope God continues to bless them, and I hope He blesses this ministry this year as we go forward.
For sure. So until next time, and we'll be back next week, next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care. God bless. We'll talk to you again soon.
This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast, brought to you by Vigilant Impact. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback and interaction. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams, join the discussion online, and connect with us on social media. For other great ministry resources, download the Church Security app or at our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.